I was curious about how vertical sync and G-Sync affect input lag in Rocket League specifically, and I recently got this electronics set up, so I thought I'd put something together to test this. So I took an old controller, it's a Logitech F510, and I soldered some leads to it so that I can measure when the A button is pressed. So if we look over here, the purple line is hooked up to the buttons. When I press the A button, you can see that the signal changes. Back over to this side, I have a light sensor pointed at the boost of the car. So when I push that button, we see the brightness change on the monitor. Back over here, that's the yellow line. Let me put this back into single mode. So a single trigger, so I push the A button once, it triggers and it captures the data. So right there is when the button is pressed, and right here is when the boost is shown turning on the screen. And that's about 50 milliseconds right there, 52 milliseconds. So we can do this several times to get a bunch of data. And so what I've done is I've gone through and tested this with various settings, including G-Sync, vertical sync, triple buffering, ULMB, as well as a couple of other things. The data is attached in the description. Just a little bit about the monitor that I'm using. This is an ASUS ROG PG279. Currently I'm running it in just normal mode, but if I enable ULMB, you'll notice something rather interesting over on the scope, which is that when I run it this time, you see a series of spikes, and that's due to the backlight strobing of the monitor. So you can actually count the number of frames. So the button is pressed here, so you have 1 frame, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then on the 6th frame the boost turns on. So I'll have a link to this in the description, but I just wanted to point out a couple of things. So if you set the FPS limit all the way to maximum and disable vertical sync, you get an average delay time of about 38 or 39 milliseconds. If you set the FPS limit down to 120 but keep vertical sync off, then your mean delay time jumps up to 52 milliseconds. And at 60 FPS, you go up to 61 milliseconds. Enabling vertical sync bumps your delay up to 68 milliseconds. There's not much difference of whether or not you use vertical sync in-game versus the NVIDIA control panel. Triple buffering also doesn't make much difference. And G-Sync also doesn't really make much difference compared to standard vertical sync, a few milliseconds only. Another thing that I noticed that was kind of annoying, I guess a bug in the game or something with my system, is if I set the max FPS up to 250, disable vertical sync, and resume game, the frame rate reverts itself down to 120. So if I open up the menu again, so I got the menu open, go to options, look at the frame rate again, you can see it goes up to 250. But then if I close that menu, after some time this frame rate will drop back down again. I'm not sure exactly what causes it, but and there you can see it's back down to 120. And the only way to get it back to go back up is to open the menu again, go into options. The FPS jumps back up, and then it's back, but only for a short period of time. I'm not sure what causes this. It's probably unique to my system, but if anyone else has experienced this, I'd be curious to know.